All right, I'm coming back to you live with another tip. I gave you a tip a few weeks ago about that elbow thing. Well, I had a brain fart there for a minute. That little tool that I showed you how to use right in between the elbows. And so this little tool here is useful for getting down in there and separating right in between the elbow, where the elbow and the arm come together. So this one is similar to that. And I know what happens with, say, a carving. I'll show you a carving of a dancing couple that I've got. Let me zoom out a little bit so you can see it. So here's a carving I did some time ago of a dancing couple, and I leave it there as an example because I really don't like the face on the girl, and you and I know how hard faces are. Anyway, part of the problem is getting into places like right in here. Let me grab a pointer. When you're carving in these areas right here, yeah, you can drill that out, you can cut it out, you can do a number of different things. But what you end up you end up with grain the way it runs. And so on this arm right here, what you get is the grain running this way, so you have to carve down here. Grain is running this way, so you have to carve up that way, and it gets awkward in here, especially right in here in the body, because you're carving, and if there's any type of profile to it where it's not flat, then you end up having a hard time getting those little fuzzies out of there. So one of the things that we do is use sandpaper. And so we can use sandpaper, and here I've got some 120, I think is what this is. This is 220. And this is 400. And I'm not advocating not to use sandpaper. I'm not advocating to use sandpaper. I'm simply telling you some of the pitfalls and some of the advantages of doing that. Pardon me a second. Sandpaper has a tendency to rough up the wood. Now, this 120 isn't really rough sandpaper. It's okay. But when you start sanding on your wood, what you end up with, depending on the grit, it ends up leaving streak marks and ends up making it roughed up a little bit. And then you continue on down through your grit. So you go down from 120 to 220 to 400. But the question is, then it leaves you with, where do I stop? Because as we turn pins on the lathe, sometimes we'll use sandpaper all the way up to 12,000 grit. And it makes a micro shiny finish, which we don't really want on our carvings. But we take this kind of stuff and we roll it around a dowel. We fold it so it's got a corner there that we can use. And we do a lot of things with this sandpaper in terms of how we want to finish our carving. Anyway, I found a way to do that without having to use sandpaper. The other thing I don't like about sandpaper, let me grab that again. The other thing I don't like about sandpaper is these little pieces of grit are glued onto the paper. And as you carve and as you use this to rough up your wood, these little grains come off of here. And you'll see them after you use them for a while. You'll see that the place I haven't used the sandpaper, still rough. The place where I have is smoother, because these things are getting worn down. And getting worn down means they're getting deposited on your wood. When you do that, and then you take your knife and you carve on it, guess what you get? That's right, you get all those micro striations on your tool. And I don't know about you, but I don't like polishing them out of there because it sometimes takes a lot of work. So we spend a lot of time finding our tools that we like a lot, and we like them polished, and we like them clean, and we like them sharpened. Well, when you have sandpaper that you're using on your tool, you're going to leave those scratch marks all over your tool, and that's something that I prefer not doing if I can help it. So I found these things called Rasps, R-A-S-P-S. A rasp is simply a metal file, and they make them in all kinds of different profiles. This one in particular has a rounded surface here, so if you looked at it real close, I don't know that I can get that up. It's not real flat, it's rounded. So it's rounded here and pointed at the end, so you can get down into those tight spots and get right in there with that rasp. You can get right in there and you can sand a little bit more. And I say sand, you're not really sanding because you're not using sandpaper, you're using a rasp. So you're removing wood. Anyway, you buy these and they're relatively inexpensive. I think I paid $6 or $8 for a pack of 6, and I think there's other brands of them like this one right here that has a more comfortable handle. But they make these things in square. This is a square one. Not sure you could see that very well, but this is square. This one is flat. So it's a flat, thin one. It's not pointed. It's very flat and thin. They make them with, that's another square one. Let me find one. Flat and pointed. Pointed at the end. They make them, that's the same thing there. They make them round, and you can get these round ones that'll fit into a certain profile. They make, where's the other one I was going to talk about? Square, flat, round, triangular. Let me find the triangular ones. Here we go. This one is triangular. Let me grab a better one. This one has one side, two sides, and a third side. And these things are useful because you can use them for one particular part or the other. So when you're getting down in here, the flat one may only work down to a certain part, but then I get this one here that's got the triangle to it, and I can go in there and I can remove a lot of those little fuzzies up in here. It's not a sanding because you're not depositing sandpaper grits all over this, but it is a form of removing wood. Anyway, I bought these off of Amazon. They're relatively expensive. I use them on certain classes that I do. We do some beginner classes where for a beginner it's not easy for them to manipulate their knife, and they use this type of wood removal tool. But I just wanted to bring that to you, that there's all kinds of different ones here, and I think I've got 10, 15, I got about 40 of these because they come in a pack of 6, and I was buying a bunch for my classes. I wanted to make sure that each student had several different ones, and they didn't have to wait on someone to buy more, or to quit using those. But there are tons of these, and these aren't all the different profiles that they make. They make a whole lot of different profiles, and I didn't pay a whole lot for any of these, but they're relatively useful tools for using on smaller stuff. Again, I'm not telling you not to use sandpaper. It has its purpose, and it has its point, and it has its use. I don't use a whole lot of it, mainly because I don't want to rough up my wood, because if I start with 60 or 80 or 100, then I got to move up to 200, then I got to move to 300, then I got to 400, and at some point I've got to stop, and it may not be where you want to stop, because you may still have to sand, but it's not going to get any better for you. So give these a try. They're relatively inexpensive. They're easy to use, and they don't take up a whole lot of room in your toolbox, and you can have a lot of fun with just making different profiles. So I hope this helps a lot. If you find another tip that you want me to talk about, or one that you want to profile, I'll be glad to do a video on it. I'll be glad to show people the good and the bad of it, and that way we let people make their own decisions. So anyway, we'll see you on the next video. I've got one coming out real soon. I'm going to do a Santa Claus, and I hope we get that on the recording table real soon. Talk to you later.